What's going on, everyone? It's your man, Louie T, here with another installment of the Louie T Network podcast. Thank you guys for joining me. Late Night Louie edition, Tuesday, March 19th. We are in week 2 of free agency. So the main moves that had a lot of the luster have already been made. Now we're in that secondary market. There's still some big names out there: Xavier Howard, Justin Simmons. Mike Williams just signed with the Jets, so he's off the board. So really the two big names that still exist: Odell Beckham Jr., I guess, if we still consider him a big name, won't be back with the Ravens. But for the most part, the guys that we expected to find jobs have found jobs already. And the guys that are still left, they'll find jobs too, So free agency has cooled off considerably now. The draft is going to heat up here in a second. It's March, so obviously March Madness, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. March Madness gets kicked off this week. As a matter of fact, tomorrow you get the last 4 games to see who advances into that 16 slot to take on some number 1 seeds and get slaughtered in the first round. But I'm going to talk to you about March Madness here in a second. But big trade over the weekend. Wanted to touch on it yesterday. Had some things come up. Had another obligation. Didn't want to push the envelope. I said I'd come back and we'd chop it up today. So we'll talk about that Justin Fields trade and the implications there. Did they do right by Justin? We'll talk about all of that. And then I just talked about free agency kind of being in the rearview mirror, so to speak. That first week is now behind us. Most of the damage is done. Most of the money that's going to be spent has already been spent. So who are the biggest winners from free agency? All of that and more on the Louie T Network podcast that starts now. The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description. Who else could it be? Me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 406th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Hope this podcast finds you in great spirits. Hope the weekend treated you well. And we're back like cooked crack, so let's get after it. I want to start off the show before we jump into the gym dropping session and get to the meat and potatoes of why we're here. Let's start off talking about March Madness. I can't speak for you, but I've soured on the process of March Madness over the years. I used to be all in. I don't know if you guys remember this. If you've been following me long enough, then I used to do a March Madness tournament here on the Louie T Network. And the winner of that tournament would be first in the draft wrap-up series. So that's how far back it goes, right? Don't even do the draft wrap-up series anymore. So I used to be all in on March Madness in the process leading up, the Selection Sunday and the tournaments leading up to Selection Sunday, right? The ACC tournament, the Big Ten tournament. I used to be like all in on all of that stuff. I didn't watch a single second of a single game of a single tournament over the weekend. Could care less. I haven't even seen the entire field of 64 bracket. That's how little I care about the process. I used to be who's on the bubble, who's the first 4 in, the last 4 out, who got screwed. Oh no, Syracuse didn't get in. Jim Boeheim's pissed and he's going on a tirade. This year it would have been St. John's head coach Rick Pitino. I think St. John's didn't get in. I think that's who didn't get in. I don't know. All I know is Duke's a 4 seed, and I forgot who we're playing. But I wouldn't be shocked if we got beat. We suck. Okay. So I can sit here and talk all of this shit that I want about not giving a damn about the process anymore, which I don't. I used to fill out brackets. I would fill out like 5 brackets. I'd go into Yahoo Sports Brackology contest, bracketology, excuse me, contest. I'd fill out like 5 brackets, get in like 6 different leagues, be following these things, and then I'd have my one, serious bracket, the one main bracket that I'd brag about if it was doing well. I haven't filled out a bracket in like 3 years. But the minute that basketball tips off on Thursday at 12:15 Eastern time, that first game, my ass will be in front of that television watching that shit and having 2-3 screens up, watching multiple games. I'll be invested. I can talk all the shit I want about the process leading up and not being as invested as I used to in terms of filling out brackets and all of that. But you best believe if a buzzer beater happens, yours truly will be witnessing it live. Okay? I still care about March Madness. Still care about March Madness. I don't care about all the extracurriculars that hover around March Madness. Just feed me the product when it's done. I don't care about how you prepare it. I don't care about you heating it up to 450 degrees and preheating the oven. I don't care about what ingredients you put in it. When it's done and it's ready to be consumed, when the bracket is all filled out and you got all the teams and all the number 1 seeds in the East region, the Midwest region, and the West bracket in the East, that's when I show up. That's when I consume. All of that is done. Now the product is ready to be consumed. Here I am. Where's my slice? It's going to be fun like it always is. And you know what's crazy about March Madness too? Again, I can't speak for you. I'm all in that first weekend. Oh my God. I'm up till 2:00 in the morning watching every single game. My wife is right there with me every step of the way. We're going nuts, buzzer beaters, last second finish. Oh my God, turn it to this game. This game has, 47 seconds left and it's a 2-point game. Go there, go there. She's all in with me. That's my ride or die. Soon as we narrow that pool down to like 16 teams after you get past that second weekend, I'm somewhat invested the second weekend. Not as invested as I am that first weekend, but if the right teams make it, I'm there, right? 1 or 2 Cinderellas. My Duke Blue Devils are still in it. I know we're not going anywhere. I just hope we don't get cooked in the field of 64 in the first game against this 13 seed. I don't expect us to make it out of the first weekend. I don't know who we'd have to play if we were to win this game, who the next team would be. Obviously, if you're a 2 seed, 4 seed, you'd have to play a 5 seed if they take care of the 12 seed. So whoever that 5 seed is probably good enough to beat us, personally. But we'll see. We might not even make it there, right? Who am I kidding? We're not a very good team this year. So I've seen Duke teams like this before, and I know how this movie ends. So it's funny because I'll be all in on Thursday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And then come that following week, if there are no interesting storylines, if Loyola Marymount with Sister Jean isn't in it, if what was that? Chicago something with Sister Jean, or one of my favorites back in the day was Florida Gulf Coast. They're in it this year for the 10th time. One year they had a bunch of high flying white boys and they were out here dunking on everybody and they were fun to watch. You give me one of those teams that come out of nowhere and make it to like the Elite 8, I'm there. but my Duke Blue Devils isn't in it. You don't give me an interesting storyline. I'm good. I've already watched enough the first weekend. I don't need to sign up for the second weekend. So we'll see what happens. I hope there's a lot of buzzer beaters, close games, all that good stuff that we've come to know and love with March Madness. That's what it's all about when it's all said and done. That's what we remember. I can't even tell you who won the national championship last year. Who cares? If it wasn't your team, who cares? Right? That's the thing about March Madness is nobody cares. Unless it's your team that won, nobody cares. At the end of the day, we just want to see good games, buzzer beaters, all that good stuff. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to my gym dropping session, shall we? I think we shall. Let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T-double-E. Let me open you up. Get you thinking a little bit. So, over the weekend, massive trade that we've been waiting on since the start of the new league year. Maybe even prior to that, we were anticipating a trade with Justin Fields being involved. We didn't know when it was going to happen, who it was going to involve, where he was going to land, what compensation would be involved, but we knew it was going to happen at some point. Now, there were still some in the Chicago fan base that were holding on to hope that they'd select Justin Fields, trade away the number 1 overall pick, and build around Justin Fields. Wasn't going to happen. And I think the final nail in the coffin happened in Indianapolis during the combine when they were able to sit down with, really for the very first time, Caleb Williams and really get a sense of where his head was at. You've heard a lot of stuff. They've probably talked to people close to him, but they hadn't actually talked to Caleb Williams themselves. They walked away, and the reports were they walked away from Indy even more convinced and impressed that he was the right quarterback. He was the guy for the job. So at that point, it wasn't about whether or not they were trading Justin Fields. It was just to whom, for what, and when. When you go to Indy for the combine, a lot of deals get done. A lot of conversations are had. And one of the things that came out of Indy with the Bears in particular was, we're going to wait out the market a bit. We're going to be patient. I think that was their fatal flaw and their biggest mistake in all of this, is they wanted to wait to see what transpired with all the other quarterbacks. Who could have known we'd see so much shuffling of the QB deck the way that we did, especially with the backups, with Mac Jones being shipped off to Jacksonville and Desmond Ridder being shipped off to Arizona, and ultimately Kenny Pickett being shipped off to Philadelphia, and Sam Howell being shipped off to Seattle. Who knew we would see that much movement? Kirk Cousins chose Atlanta. We had no idea, right? Drew Lock chose the Giants. A lot of shuffling of the deck, as you would expect with the backups, but not in the trade market the way that we saw. And ultimately, after the dust settled and the smoke cleared, the market for Justin Fields wasn't there. They needed to strike while the iron was hot. They waited too long. And now it felt like they had to take what somebody was willing to give them instead of them dictating the value of Justin Fields. So reportedly, how this really kind of came about was Kenny Pickett was acting like a baby back bitch when he found out that the Seattle Seahawks, the Pittsburgh Steelers rather, had traded for Russell Wilson or signed Russell Wilson. He was being released. He could talk to teams early, and he decided that Pittsburgh was where he wanted to go. signed a vet minimum deal, $1.2 million 1 year. Let's see how it goes. But he was pretty much assured he'd be starting. We all saw how the season ended for Kenny Pickett. He got hurt. The Steelers actually got better when he got hurt. Mason Rudolph came in and played well, to the point that when Kenny Pickett was healthy, he didn't play. As a matter of fact, there was a story that was released that said Kenny Pickett refused to be the third string emergency quarterback in one of those games late in the season. He kind of refutes that, says that it didn't go down that way. Everything happened that was supposed to happen. Sounds like Kenny Pickett's a real piece of work, kind of a spoiled brat. That's what it sounds like. But I don't know Kenny Pickett, and I can't say what he is or he isn't. Just going off of what I've read and his response to everything, which I saw, I reacted the way that I was supposed to react. And everything happened. He's a Philadelphia Eagles fan, though. He grew up an Eagles fan. So him getting to the other side of Pennsylvania probably felt good for him. I don't like the way he did it, but one thing I know about the Steelers organization and Mike Tomlin is we're not going for no tomfoolery. Either you want to be here or you don't. And if you don't, let me help you find a way out of here. So they moved his ass expeditiously once they found out he was cutting up. And that opened the door for Justin Fields. I wonder if Fields was a target for the Steelers after the Russell Wilson deal. Was he a target for them still, despite having Kenny Pickett? Or once Kenny Pickett showed his ass, instead of acting with class, and then decided to ship him off to the Eagles, is that when Justin Fields really became a reality for the Steelers at that moment? Now, let me just talk about the compensation for a second. We'll double back and come back and talk about the compensation. So the compensation for Justin Fields is one that leads me to believe that they, in fact, did what they said they were going to do. Justin Fields was shipped off to Pittsburgh for a conditional 6th round pick, not in 2024 in this upcoming draft, but in 2025, next year's draft. One can only ask themselves, why trade him now if you're not even fishing for compensation in this year's draft, but rather next year's draft? If you're willing to take draft capital in next year's draft, what's the hurry? What's your rush? You could have traded him on draft night, probably gotten a lot more. And reports are that there were other offers on the table for Fields that were of greater value. Initially I was like, yeah, right. Of course, that's what you would say after getting only a 6th rounder in 2025 that can end up being a 4th rounder based off of play time. Of course you would say that. That's nothing. You got nothing for a former 1st round pick that you traded up to acquire. You got nothing. Of course you would say there were other offers on the table. But then when you sit back and you think about it, and you assess what actually took place here, think about it. They didn't have to trade him to the Steelers. They didn't have to take what they got. Look, I don't know how many real offers were on the table and how many teams were truly interested in trading for Justin Fields. We'll never know, okay? What I do know is if you're trading for next year draft capital, if that's what you're in it for, which is what they ultimately got out of this deal, then you have no incentive to trade him right now. It makes no sense. You could have waited until draft day and gotten compensation for next year's draft then. You could have waited until after the draft, until one of these quarterback needy teams didn't get their guy and now feel even more desperate. Say Minnesota. And again, I don't know if they're really interested in Justin Fields anyway. But say Minnesota isn't able to strike a deal with nor Arizona or the Los Angeles Chargers. Can't get to 4, can't get to 5, can't get their guy. They get stuck holding those 2 first-round picks and have to make selections. if I were them and that situation played itself out, I'd probably just take Michael Penix Jr. with that second first-round pick. That's probably what I would do. But that's no here nor there. The bottom line is, let's just say they came out of this without a quarterback, it pretty much being left with egg all over their face. Now they're desperate and they need a guy, and maybe they fork over, a third-round pick. Maybe they fork over a second-rounder next year for Justin Fields. Let's say the Raiders, sitting there at 13, don't come away with the quarterback. They had their eye on J.J. McCarthy, and he's gone. So they end up not coming away with the quarterback. I mean, Gardner Minshew's cool, but it's Gardner Minshew. Maybe they decide to upgrade the position with a young quarterback that gives them potentially a future in Justin Fields. Again, highly unlikely that any of these scenarios play themselves out, but you don't know. You could have made this same deal with Pittsburgh after the draft. No harm, no foul. But they made it prior to the draft. And here's why this is important. Their GM, Ryan Poles, said at the Combine, we want to do right by Justin. We want to do what's best for the Chicago Bears, but we want to do what's right for Justin. We want to do right by Justin. He's been so good through all of this. He's been nothing but a consummate professional, great teammate, everything you would want in a franchise quarterback, other than the production on the field and staying healthy. They literally did what they said they were going to do, which is do right by Justin. They didn't maximize the value of this quarterback and this asset that they had in Justin Fields. They didn't maximize it to the best of their abilities to benefit the Chicago Bears. They gave Justin Fields the best opportunity he's going to get to become a starter in this league, and they took less to do so. That's the only explanation for getting a 2025 sixth-round pick, essentially, because if he doesn't play, that's what it's going to be. That could potentially shift into a fourth-rounder based off of him getting on the field and staying on the field and performing at a high enough level. But they reportedly said that Justin Fields chose Pittsburgh, hand-selected the Steelers. Let's say that there were 4 opportunities. Sounds a lot like Matthew Stafford a few years ago, handpicked the Los Angeles Rams when the Lions said, hey, we're going to move you. And they wanted to do right by Matthew Stafford. They didn't have to send. He didn't have a no-trade clause. They could have sent him anywhere they wanted to. But they wanted to do right by Matthew Stafford. So what did they do? They allowed him to pick his destination, and then they made a deal with the place that he selected. That's what it feels like the Bears just did for Justin Fields. Fields wanted to go to Pittsburgh, and why wouldn't you want to go play for the Steelers organization? It's a first-class organization who's very loyal, almost loyal to a fault. They were going to give Dwayne Haskins another opportunity to be a starter in this league had he not passed away tragically. They would have given him another opportunity. He was buying his time in Pittsburgh, and when the moment came, he was going to see the field. And they were going to find out if this young kid who probably came into the league a year or two too early, if he had matured enough to where he was ready to contribute at a high level as an NFL starting caliber quarterback. They were going to give him a shot, just like they're going to potentially give Justin Fields a shot. They run their organization in such a way that it's respected. You know what you're going to get. And he's going to get an opportunity one way or another. Now, immediately after this trade was made, the first thing that everybody thought, including myself, was, well, is he going to have a chance to compete to start? He might beat out Russell Wilson. I know that's not what Russell Wilson signed up for. I know he didn't sign up. Even though it's $1.2 million, I know he didn't go to Pittsburgh to be a backup. Russell Wilson's ego is way too big for that. He'd rather retire than be somebody's backup quarterback. And immediately after that trade was consummated, first thing that came out was Justin Fields will not be competing to start in Pittsburgh. He'll be backing up Russell Wilson. Okay. Now, again, Russ's stop in Denver couldn't have been more disastrous than what it turned out to be. Even when it felt like things were going at least in the right direction, they quit on him, sat him down, and ate $85 million to get rid of him. So whatever the case may be, it didn't go well in Denver for whatever reason. Now let's see how it goes in Pittsburgh. They've got some work to do. They traded away one of their receivers. I like the trade for them, but they're going to need some help. They got some draft capital to be able to clean that up, take care of business there. But what's interesting about all of this is doing right by Justin, giving him a real opportunity to start, because all it takes is Russell Wilson to bang his thumb on somebody's helmet like he did in Seattle and break it. Not to wish that on anybody. Let me knock on a little bit of wood. That was way too specific. I was tripping. But all it takes is for Russell Wilson to get injured, Russell Wilson not to play well. Now, it's going to take a lot for him to not play well and get benched. As we know, the Steelers, again, very loyal organization. They're going to give him every opportunity to prove that the Russ from Seattle that was a Super Bowl winner and made 2 trips in a row to the Super Bowl and was looked upon as one of the best quarterbacks in the league and a future Hall of Famer is still somewhere down in there. And they're going to try to pull him out. So they're going to give him every opportunity in Pittsburgh. The question becomes, at what point on this 1-year deal? And then we also heard that Russ and the Steelers are going to try to work out a multi-year deal. And I'm thinking, if that's the case, then how is this a good landing destination for Justin Fields? But a lot of things would have to materialize for Russell Wilson to end up getting a multi-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He'd have to come in there and really take that organization by the horns and lead them to the playoffs, win a playoff game, and really show the Russell Wilson that we knew back in Seattle is still alive and well. And I don't think there are many people betting on that as of right now. So we'll see how things go, but Justin Fields could be on the field as early as this year. As early as this year. And that's why he chose Pittsburgh. For the opportunity, number one, but also probably 1B. You can't get a more stable organization in the NFL than the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've had 3 coaches over the last 90 years. Okay. Doesn't get much more stable than the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you're looking for a second act in your career, looking for a place to call home and settle down and have a city and a team and an organization embrace you, I can't think of a better place to go than with the Pittsburgh Steelers, with Mike Tomlin. This is important. With Mike Tomlin as the head coach. Remember, this could be it for Mike Tomlin. We heard innuendos of him being out in Pittsburgh, him potentially retiring. We saw the tirade. Well, it wasn't a tirade. They asked him a question, and he walked off the podium after the final game of the season when they lost. We saw a frustrated Mike Tomlin. But he did come back and apologize, say, I let my emotions get the better of me, et cetera, et cetera. And he's still there. He's still coaching. And as long as he's there, I think Justin Fields has a shot. If he's no longer there, then I don't know what becomes of Justin Fields. But What a fascinating trade that ended up being, in a situation where a GM didn't lie to us. Ryan Poles literally said, we want resolution for Justin. We don't want him living in a world that is gray, right? We want to make this as black and white, cut and dry as we can for Justin Fields. He doesn't need to live in a world that's gray. We want to do right by Justin. Well, that's exactly what they did. Bravo and kudos to the Chicago Bears. That's as classy a way to end a situation with a guy who you really respect. And I can tell you this right now, looking at it from the Bears' perspective, I saw an outpouring of support from their fan base like I've never seen before for a guy that didn't win anything for that organization and, had multiple years to prove that he was the guy. Left Chicago with a losing record, 40 touchdowns, 30 interceptions, couldn't stay healthy, never played a full season, showed flashes, but never showed the consistency that needed to come with those flashes. Yet there was an outpouring of support, not just from the fans, because the fans were crazy. I saw so much support. Oh my God. I've never seen anything like it. They had attached themselves, and Justin Fields is a good dude, man. And I think that's a huge part of it. He's just a good dude, man. It's hard not to root for good guys, and he's a good guy. But he had endeared himself to those players in that locker room. They were Team Justin all the way. And I don't think some of the players in the locker room were particularly happy about the decision, but they knew what was coming. They saw the writing on the wall. They had time to prepare for the inevitable, which was Justin Fields getting traded this offseason, and the Bears taking their shot, man. They're going to swing for the fences and Caleb Williams and see if this guy can be a Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers-esque quarterback. And if he is in fact that, then they made the right decision. Either way, they made the right decision, because what we've already seen with Justin Fields, and we can't say that he wasn't going to get any better, but it didn't appear that he was going to get much better than he already was in Chicago. It kind of felt like, okay, we got enough of a track record here, enough of a sample size to see what he is, and kind of feel like we know how this movie ends and we're ready to move on. There were some that thought that if he could have beaten the Green Bay Packers at the end of the season, there were two games in particular that a lot of people kind of point to and say, this was what led to him ultimately being traded. Like, the decision was made a lot easier for the Bears brass. They went to Cleveland. They were playing great football, were the Bears, and they were winning games, and Fields had come off the injury and he was playing good football. It wasn't always pretty. But they were finding ways to win. They blew out the Arizona Cardinals. They beat up on some teams. They had Detroit on the ropes, let them off the hook in Detroit, and then they came back and beat Detroit, if I'm not mistaken, in Chicago, right? Should have swept them, if I'm not mistaken. Had those boys dead to rights in Detroit and blew that lead. Had Minnesota I want to say it was on Monday night, blew that lead. It was an ugly game. Oh my God, one of the ugliest games of the season. I mean, I think the final score ended up being something like 12-10 or some shit like that. I think the Bears might have scored 4 field goals or something. It was nasty. It was a hideous watch. Fields did not play well, but when the game was on the line, he took them down the field in a game that they had no business trailing in to begin with, and got him in the field goal range, and they won the game. And so they were playing good football, winners of probably like 4 out of 5, 5 out of 6 or something. And they headed to Cleveland in a game that they probably should have won. Cleveland did not play well that day. Joe Flacco threw like 3 interceptions. They should have won, but Fields didn't take that opportunity by the horns. He did not lead them to victory that day. They lose that game. And then the following week, it's Green Bay and a chance to knock the Packers out of the playoffs. And he goes in there, and I won't say he laid an egg, but it wasn't a great performance. It was a dud of a performance, and it really was the entire team, but more so the offense. The defense gave them every opportunity they needed to pull that game out, and the offense just didn't show up. And that felt like remember Good Morning Football? Remember Peter, oh man, what's my guy's name? He had this, it wasn't Peter, it was the other guy. He made this passionate speech to Justin Fields. I know you guys remember that. He made this passionate speech why Justin Fields needs to plant his flag and once and for all, quiet all the critics and show why he's the quarterback for Chicago. Why he's the guy that they've been searching for since Sid Luckman or whomever the quarterback was last in Chicago that was any good. Some would argue Jim McMahon, but we're talking about like really, really good. And it was a dope speech. And it was one of those go get 'em Tiger type of things. And I think there were a lot of people that felt like if Justin Fields is serious about remaining in Chicago, he needs to beat the Green Bay Packers and keep them out of the playoffs. And it didn't happen. I don't know if that changes the thought process of the Bears brass or not, but I know it made their decision a lot easier when he didn't close the show down the stretch. And there were a lot of conversations about fourth quarter play, blown leads, missed opportunities. Again, that Lions game comes to mind, that Vikings game that they ultimately came back and won, but they shouldn't have been in that position to begin with. They dominated that game, and the Vikings were awful that night, and yet they found themselves trailing late in that ball game. Not closing it against Cleveland. There were a lot of questions about his play when it mattered most in the fourth quarter. And so I don't know if he could have salvaged the situation or not, but he didn't do himself any favors by not winning those games down the stretch. So he's now in Pittsburgh. The Bears did exactly what they said they were going to do. They did right by Justin. They didn't even get 2024 compensation for him. They got 2025 compensation for him. A conditional 6th-round pick that can turn into a 4th-rounder in 2025. He's going to have a chance to compete in Pittsburgh at some point, you would think. Could be as early as this season. Who knows what Russell Wilson's going to do with the Steelers? I don't know how many offers were on the table, and we'll close out with this. But that could not have been the best one. I refuse to believe that a pick, not even in this year's draft, was the best you could get for Justin Fields. They literally did what they said they were going to do. Do right by Justin. Pretty damn admirable, if you ask me. In a league, in a sport where organizations always, all caps, always do what's best for them and rarely do what's best for the player, the Bears took the road less traveled. Kudos to the Bears. We'll see how it works out for them. Maybe they just got themselves some really good juju in the process. Let's get to social media maneuvers. Y'all know what it is. I'm a midnight marauder. Y'all know how this goes. If you're out there and you want your comment to be read, super chats are the best way to make that happen. You want to jump to the front of the line and ensure that your comment is read. Otherwise, use the hashtag LouieTLive to have your comment read on the air. And if it is pertinent and time permits, we will get to your comment. So before we do that, I want to go ahead and just give you my list of the biggest winners of free agency to this point. The teams that I think that have improved their situation the most, give themselves a chance to be in the conversation for winning a Lombardi next year, who elevated their roster off the strength of free agency before we even hit the draft. Who did the best job of doing that? So, when I start feeling listy, I start listing things, and my lists are usually comprised of, you guessed it, 7 items. So without any further ado, I want to take a look at the 7 teams and explain to you why I feel like these 7 teams have improved their rosters the most. Before I do that, though, I can't jump right into the list without a little bit of honorable mention action. So what we'll do is we'll go through these teams, take a look at what they've done, and we'll start with some honorable mentions. So let's start with the Tennessee Titans. See what they did here. All right. So we just talked about the Steelers and Mason Rudolph. He heads to Tennessee now on a 1-year deal. So that's a solid backup option to Will Levis. No more Ryan Tannehill in the mix, obviously. Tony Pollard was one of the first free agent signings of the period. The running backs went so quick. Like I said, Chicago, they had DeAndre Swift's signing in the drafts. Soon as 12 o'clock hit, they hit the send button. And then right after him was Tony Pollard going to Tennessee. 3 years, $24 million. Here's the thing that stuck out for me is, I'm going to ask y'all a question and y'all can let me know. Am I tripping? Is Calvin Ridley, when I saw this, I think this was the most surprising deal that I saw out of all the deals that were dished out over. I mean, Robert Hunt getting a 5-year, $100 million deal was a bit extravagant for me, a little bit too much for my taste. But if that's what you felt like you needed to do, knock yourself out. Is Calvin Ridley worth $92 million, 50 of it fully guaranteed? Did you see enough from him in Jacksonville coming back from that year-long suspension? Did you see enough to warrant a damn near $100 million contract with 50 of it guaranteed? As I damn sure did not. And I heard that they got into a bidding war. He's not worth getting into a bidding war for. Now, look, the Titans don't have shit at receiver. DeAndre Hopkins is there. And they needed to give him somebody opposite to pair with him, but 4 years, $92 million. What the? That's crazy money, bro. Titans fell and bumped their damn head. 50 of it guaranteed. His deal should have been 4 years, $50 million, not 50 of it guaranteed. Jesus. We talking about the same receiver? Or am I tripping? Maybe I'm tripping. I just wanted to mention that because actually I think that division in particular was one of the most improved divisions through free agency. The next team I want to talk about are the Detroit Lions. This is a team that made it all the way to the NFC Championship game, should have made it to the Super Bowl, really blew it. We're up 24-7, was dominating the game, and somehow managed to blow it and lose. And here they are going out and doing some things that I feel like are going to help them have a shot to get back there again. Now, will it happen? I don't know. They're not sneaking up on anybody next year. Don't think they snuck up on teams this year. Everybody was kind of talking about the Lions as a chic pick. They went out and they got it done. That was impressive. So they bring back some of their own guys, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Graham Glasgow are all brought back. Emmanuel Mosley was brought back. Michael Badgley was brought back. So they bring back a lot of guys. Jalen Reeves may have been brought back. But look at some of the names that they brought in, right? Kevin Zeitler, that's a big one. You know, older, seasoned veteran offensive lineman. They lost a couple of guys along their offensive line, most notably Jonah Jones, or Jonah, Jackson, excuse me, Jonah Jackson. So Zeitler comes in and he's going to be able to help. Edge rusher Marcus Davenport remains to be seen what he can provide. He was very disappointing in Minnesota last year, but this is a low-risk, high-reward proposition on a 1-year deal. I like it. I love this trade for Carlton Davis. I thought one of their biggest deficiencies last year was at corner. They had some guys, but none of them were all that good. Davis upgrades that position tremendously for them. So does Amik Robertson. I don't think a lot of people love Amik Robertson as much as I do. I loved him coming out of La Tech, went to the Raiders, thought he did some good things there. He's just undersized. We'll see how they utilize him, but those two deals in particular, coupled with Marcus Davenport and Kevin Zeitler, I just like some of the moves they made there to stay relevant. How about going right down to the next team staying in that division, the Green Bay Packers, who never spend money in free agency? They're one of the most frugal teams in the league. They take care of their own usually, but they do not spend on guys outside of their team very often. To see them spend, and look, the list is not that long, but to see them spend 4 years, $48 million on Josh Jacobs, and 4 years, $68 million on Xavier McKinney, that's big for them because they generally don't spend on outsiders. So I thought that was interesting there, which is what prompted me to make them an honorable mention. How about the New York Giants? They get Drew Lock on a 1-year, $5 million deal. I've heard that he's going to have a chance to compete. That's what he was told, which is why he chose the Giants. If they're really considering drafting a quarterback, how in the hell is Drew Lock supposed to be competing to start with Daniel Jones still there making a massive amount of money and a rookie potentially being thrown into the mix? I find that hard to believe, but who knows? They could draft a rookie in the second round, like a Michael Penix Jr., deem he's not ready to play, which is crazy because he's probably one of the more ready quarterbacks in this year's draft class, but that's no here nor there. And maybe Drew Lock does get an opportunity. We'll see. I just find it hard to believe that he'll get an opportunity to start if the Giants add a rookie. If they don't, then he could be in the mix in New York. We'll see. Devin Singletary comes over from the Texans. Look, it's not an upgrade. It's a downgrade from Saquon Barkley. They had to do something, right? You could do a hell of a lot worse than Devin Singletary. I'll tell you that much. Jermaine, and there was a Giants fan that said, I am so glad the Giants finally started to pay attention to the offensive line. We're finally getting in the trenches. And boy, did they ever. Jermaine Illuminor, 2-year deal, swing tackle, but more so a right tackle than anything else. John Runyon, really good guard option. I really like this signing, 3 years, $30 million. Aaron Stinney comes over from Tampa Bay, if I'm not mistaken. So he's going to come in and compete. And then Austin Schlottman comes over and gives them more depth on that offensive line. So they really focused in on a group that was abysmal a season ago, gave up the most sacks in the NFL last year. And we'll see what those changes bring about. But you can't expect change without change. So good to see them focusing there. And then obviously the big deal here, Brian Burns being traded for a swapping of 5th rounders, and they gave up a 2 essentially for him and gave him a massive deal, 5 years, up to $150 million with 76 fully guaranteed upon signing for a guy who hasn't had 2 double-digit sack seasons in his career and has never eclipsed 13 sacks in a season in his career. It's a lot of money. They're betting on his upside. They better hope they're right. But it's a hell of a guy to bet on, though. There's a lot of talent there. So Giants were worth mentioning to me. How about the Jets? Let's go to the New York Jets here, because I think these last 2 signings that they put together have been extremely impactful to the point where I think that this was a team that didn't need to do much, right? They didn't need to do much. And they needed a competent backup. They got that in Tyrod Taylor. Obviously, if they would have had Tyrod last year, they probably would have made the playoffs. If he would have stayed healthy, that's always been his issue. But it's a good deal for Tyrod, good landing destination, gives them a couple of veterans in the saddle because this team is ready to win now. This isn't a team looking, to win 3 years from now. They're looking to win right now. The signing of Tyron Smith up to $20 million, a 1-year deal, massive. Here's why. They went out and they acquired Morgan Moses in a trade, right? So now you got bookend tackles. And Morgan Moses on the right side, Tyron Smith on the left side. You add John Simpson as a guard on the interior. You've already got some guys that you've drafted over the years like Elijah Vera Tucker. And now you feel good about what you have up front in front of Aaron Rodgers. That was the biggest issue that you had was that offensive line. Now it's fixed. Now you can go out and compete. And then on top of that, you add a Javon Kinlaw. Again, if anybody knows Javon Kinlaw, his upside and what he's capable of, is Robert Saleh. He was there when they drafted him. He was probably a huge proponent of them drafting him in the first round out of South Carolina. He reunites with his former head coach or defensive coordinator, rather. There's Javon Kinlaw. And so all these moves signify a team that's going for it, which they were last year. But they're even more invested this year after seeing how well they played, beating teams like Kansas City and Buffalo. This is a team that really feels like they can compete. They just needed a quarterback. And now this fortifying of the offensive line kind of speaks to that. And then adding Mike Williams today, 1 year deal up to potentially $15 million, gives them another weapon that Aaron Rodgers can literally just go drop back and sling it 45 yards down the field. And Mike Williams, one of the best 50-50 ball go-getters in the league, can go up and snag it. He is an upgrade over the guy that I think they wasted a lot of money on last year. But, maybe he'll come back to life now that Aaron Rodgers is healthy. In what's the guy they brought from Green Bay, the big receiver? I can't even remember his name. He was so bad last year. But now they have another target in Mike Williams. So the Jets are looking to win something. And then the Chiefs. It just amazes me with this Chiefs football team that everybody's chasing them. They're looking to do something that's never been done in the NFL ever. And that's three-peat. Win 3 Super Bowls in a row. No team has done that in NFL history. And somehow their offense was not that good last year, not how we've come to know and love the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. It was the worst offense we've seen Patrick Mahomes author in his career. And yet the defense was phenomenal. They don't really lose any of their defensive pieces. They're able to franchise tag L'Jarius Sneed. I don't know if this situation has met its resolution yet, though. He could ultimately not be there by the time the season starts. We'll see. But they get Drew Tranquil back. The big piece was getting Chris Jones back. They're still intact. If L'Jarius Sneed comes back, that defense is pretty much the same defense that teams struggled with last year. But here's the kicker. Irv Smith signing a 1-year deal. I thought he was going to go crazy and snap in Cincinnati and finally show why he was highly regarded coming out of Alabama. I thought Cincinnati was going to be, with Joe Burrow, that was going to be the one. Didn't happen. Now he goes to Kansas City. He's in obscurity. Nobody's checking for him because they got Kelsey, they got this guy, they got that guy. And he can just kind of blend in and maybe be a problem as like the third tight end in Kansas City. But this is the one, Marquise Hollywood Brown. This is the one right here. That's crazy to me. How the NFL allows the Chiefs to get this dude is beyond me. He's a 50 times better version of MVS. How many times was MVS open and dropped the ball last year? Marquise Hollywood Brown ain't dropping the ball. And now he's dropped it in his career back in Baltimore. He was catching everything in Arizona. And that's, I think, who he is more of, is the guy we saw in Arizona, less of the guy that was dropping passes and really disappointing in Baltimore. Now he goes to Kansas City. Are you kidding me? He's their new Tyreek Hill. He's just got to stay healthy. Unbelievable. Unbelievable that he ends up there. So that's another honorable mention. So now we've gotten through the honorable mentions. Let's get to the teams that I think have upgraded their teams the most in free agency. And we'll start with the number 7 team on my list, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They traded for Mac Jones. We talked about that already. A 6th-round pick is the compensation that they gave up to acquire him. I think that's a great move. Young quarterback comes in, back up your franchise guy in Trevor Lawrence. We saw last year that when Lawrence got injured, they didn't have a great backup situation, and that hurt them a bit. Now you got Mac Jones. Hopefully sitting behind Trevor Lawrence will reinstill some confidence in him, and he'll play better if his number is called. But here's why they're on this list. You add Gabe Davis, 3-year, $39 million deal. You bring him back home. Went to UCF. He's from Florida. That's a great move, right? You lose Calvin Ridley, who I didn't think was all that great for you last year any damn way. And you bring in Gabe Davis. We'll see how that works out, right? Bring in Devin Duvernay, another guy that can run, help you. We'll see how that works. But here's where they really got better. You bring in Mitch Morse at center, right? An experienced veteran who has blocked for some of the best quarterbacks in the league. Started out blocking for Patrick Mahomes, then went to Buffalo and blocked for Josh Allen in the last 4 or 5 years. And now he's blocking for Trevor Lawrence. So this is an experienced center, knows what it takes to get it done, going to really lead that offensive line and help this young quarterback along. You get Josh Allen back in the fold on the franchise tag, right, which was important. You bring in Travis Gibson. This was the guy that I was trying to think of last week or maybe the week before that I was talking about that I liked in the draft that the Bears got in like the 4th round out of Tulane a few years ago, right? Or it was Tulsa, excuse me. He went to Tulsa. I liked him, and I still do. But here's where it gets really meaty for me, right? Here's where it gets really juicy in terms of why I think Jacksonville is one of the most improved teams. You get Eric Armstead, who was to me a surprise cut. Didn't really see it coming by the San Francisco 49ers. You get him on a 3-year deal on the interior of that defensive line. Ronald Darby played his ass off last year. Now, the key for him has always been health. When he's healthy, he's a damn good corner. And he played really well for the Baltimore Ravens last year. So you get him in the mix, right? You also bring in Darnell Savage, another really good piece. You lose Rayshawn Jenkins. You bring in Darnell Savage. This is a good move, right? It's a good trade-off. He's a better football player. Not as good of a tackler as Rayshawn Jenkins, but better ball skills, better, in terms of activity. I just love these upgrades to the defense. Love Mitch Morse coming in, getting Ezra Cleveland back, adding Gabe Davis, adding a more credible backup quarterback, and then signing Joey Sly. You struggled from long distance. I don't know if Joey Sly is going to be the answers that you're looking for, but big leg, just like Brandon McManus had last year. McManus missed a lot of deep kicks, missed some big kicks for you last year. Sly can be reliable. We'll see what Joey Sly shows up for you. You get the good Joey Sly. 3 years ago, he didn't miss a single kick. You get that Joey Sly, you're in business. I can tell you this much. Joey Sly hasn't seen a 50-plus yard field goal that he didn't like. McManus struggled from that distance last year. So you may be trading a little bit of the accuracy from the money distance, which is 40 to 49, which is not what you want to hear. But you kick a 54-yarder, Joey Sly's the man for the job. So I think Jacksonville Jaguars have improved their roster. Number 6 for me, we get to the Atlanta Falcons. So this doesn't look like a lot on the surface, right? I love what they've done at the receiver position, though. Ray McCloud is a speedster that offers you, special teams value as well, but a gadget guy, just so many things you can do with a Ray McCloud, and he can flat out run, right? So I like that move. Darnell Mooney is the one that I love the most, however, because I think there's tremendous upside with him. He could be a really good number 2 in this league, I feel, right? If put in the right, situation and the right circumstances. Well, this is the right circumstance. They got a number 1 receiver already. You could argue they've got a 1A, 1B if they get Pitts to play at the level that he did in his rookie season where he eclipsed 1,000 yards receiving. If he can get back to that, and he should be back to that this year, being 1 year removed from that major ACL injury. So now he should be back to feeling like himself, Kyle Pitts. You've got Drake London. You add Darnell Mooney. You got guys like Ray McCloud in the mix. And then you added a Rondale Moore, who I think is a better, more souped up version of Ray McCloud, right? Gadget guy. He was at the back end of this Cardinals roster, but he could be a problem. Not to mention having Bijan Robinson. So they've already got one of the best offensive lines in the league. So and then here's what, obviously, you know where I'm going. This is the reason why they're on this list. Anytime you can upgrade the most important position in the sport with a guy like Kirk Cousins, it gives you a shot. Just imagine if the Falcons had Kirk Cousins last year. Not only do they win the division last season, they probably win a playoff game or 2. They were that good defensively. They were in a ton of ball games that Desmond Ridder literally threw them out of. As a Commanders fan, we had 4 wins. One of them we could directly thank Desmond Ridder for. Without his contribution and his 3 interceptions, one of them the worst throw that I might have seen all season, we only win 3 games this season. So imagine if Desmond Ridder was replaced with Kirk Cousins last year. Well, you're replacing him this year. I know there are a lot of Kirk haters out there. And look, I get it. Kirk has been killing the game from a monetary standpoint. Monetarily, I've already said he's in the Hall of Fame. From a contract perspective and a career earnings, he's in the Hall of Fame. But it doesn't change the fact that he's a massive upgrade at the most important position. So that's why they're on this list. They got a legitimate shot of not only winning their division, which would put them in the playoffs, but actually making some noise when they get there. They got that kind of talent on offense. I don't know how good the defense is going to be. I think they lost their defensive coordinator that they had a season ago. I think he's now in Jacksonville, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll see if the defense can kind of do what they did last year. But this offense is going to be 10 times better than it was a season ago. Now we get to number 5 on this list, and we were just talking about them in the gym dropping session, and that's the Chicago Bears. Now, a lot of what is going to determine how good they are is the play of their rookie quarterback, Caleb Williams. And I can say that with 100% confidence because that's who they're going to draft, and he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. And how he plays is going to go a long way in determining what this season looks like for the Bears. But you know what put Caleb Williams at ease, making him feel even more comfortable about Chicago? Some of these moves that they've made this offseason. Now, last year, they took steps in the right direction. You know, Cole Kmet being drafted about 3 years ago and really morphing into that big-time tight end that you look for in the NFL is a big help. But DJ Moore coming on board last year and putting up career numbers was definitely a big thing for the Bears. They needed that. They trade for Montez Sweat. He explodes for the first double-digit sack season of his career. They give him a massive deal. Good for him. They get Jalen Johnson back in the fold. Remember, this defense was playing lights out to end the season, which is what put them in a position to win the amount of games that they did and, really start to threaten the playoff conversation until they, bottomed out at the end of the season. But that defense had come to life. Then they add Kevin Byard to that defense. And adding Gerald Everett, I just talked about Cole Kmet. Now those two tight end sets are going to be deadly. Now you add another guy and an athlete with Gerald Everett. But DeAndre Swift at the running back position gives you some explosion. They lacked that at the running back. They had some good backs last year. None of them were explosive, dynamic backs that scared you, though. Khalil Herbert is a good back. All right, Deontay Foreman is a good back. These are quality backs. None of them have the speed, however, to scare you. Enter in DeAndre Swift. All of a sudden now gives you a dynamic threat out of the backfield. And then the trade for Keenan Allen was the cherry on top. Now you have a real receiver opposite of DJ Moore. And really, it's a 1A, 1B type of scenario. Keenan Allen, you hear his name, you think, okay, yeah, he's 31, he's older, yada, yada, yada. Keenan Allen had the most catches of his NFL career last season. Keenan Allen had the second most yards, or was it the second most catches? He had over 100 catches last year. Let's just say that. Whether it's the most or the second most, he had I think he had the most yards he had in his career last season. He had the second most touchdowns he's had in his career with 7. So if you think Keenan Allen has fallen off, and he did all of this, mind you, in just 13 games. He did not play all 17 games. So imagine had he played 17 games, he would have set career highs across the board. This guy still got good football left in him. And remember, he was never a speed merchant. His game was always predicated on separation, elite route running. That stuff doesn't go away. Like fine wine, it just gets better with time. So he's going to be the perfect complement to DJ Moore. And you just look at what the Bears have put together. This is a really solid roster around this young quarterback that they're going to bring into the mix. I got to say, they don't have a lot of draft capital, do the Bears? I think they only have 4 picks in this year's draft. But they've done a lot of work to that roster to put themselves in a position to feel really good about what they've put around their young quarterback. They didn't do the same thing for Justin Fields when he was drafted, that's for sure. But they're not making the same mistake twice. I think they are the 5th best team right now in terms of upgrades in free agency. Now you get to number 4, and it's the Washington Commanders. This is a really bad team last year. Obviously won 4 games, finished with the 2nd pick in the NFL draft. All signs point to them selecting a quarterback. Which quarterback, we'll see. But they needed to overhaul this roster, and that's exactly what they've done. And generally, when you're a really bad team like Washington doesn't matter how many moves you make, it's going to really make a very negligible difference. But when you start bringing in guys, the likes of Austin Eckler, and Zach Ertz, and Tyler Biadasz, and Dorrance Armstrong, and Frankie Louvu, and Bobby Wagner, and Jeremy Chin all in the same free agency class, even if a lot of those guys are on 1-year deals, as you look to turn over your roster, instill culture, and try to really start to put the pieces of the puzzle together and build a solid foundation. When you do that in one offseason, hard to be upset at what the Commanders have done. And I don't know how many games this is going to turn into in terms of improvement, right? Don't know if this is going to yield them +3 in the left-hand category or not, +4 or 5 or even more so. But what I do know is they're going to be very competitive with what they've put on the field immediately. This isn't your typical rebuild. It's a rebuild. Don't get it twisted, but it's not your typical rebuild. This isn't the Texans from 3 years ago. when they signed just as many players as Washington did, probably more. I think this thing was probably like 6 or 7 more guys long when the Texans did it 3 years ago, when they got their new GM and they were turning that roster over like crazy. And you knew they were going to suck, and they did. And then they sucked again after that. This isn't that. The Commanders don't plan on having the number 2 overall pick again next year. The Texans had the number 2 overall pick 2 years in a row. That's not what the Commanders are looking to do here. They won't look to have the 2nd pick in the draft again next year. And it's because of this very rich free agency class that they've put together. Marcus Mariota comes on board. He's going to provide some great insight for a young quarterback. Because remember, Marcus Mariota went what in the draft back in 2015? 2nd overall. And if they draft Jaden Daniels, you're talking about number 2 overall pick, former Heisman Trophy winning Marcus Mariota, talking to number 2 overall pick, former Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Jaden Daniels. There's so many parallels there. He can talk to him about the pitfalls, what comes with being a number 2 overall pick, being the face of a franchise, and kind of help him steer clear of some of those things that he may not have steered clear of, right? The pitfalls that are there, help him navigate through some of those things. Nick Allegretti, who comes over from the Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs, who started in that Super Bowl game, tore his UCL in his elbow at the 2-minute warning of the 2nd quarter and didn't miss a single snap. Tough SOB. Cleveland Farrell, who was on the San Francisco 49ers team, who played in the Super Bowl, is coming over with that experience. Dante Fowler Jr. coming over from Dallas on that defense that was very good last season. So you see what they're doing here. Michael Davis coming over from the Chargers. Brandon McManus, new place kicker, replacing Joey Sly. Tyler Ott cleaning up a position that you never want to have a conversation about if you're a fan of a team, which is long snapper. Washington had long snapping issues. So a lot of upgrades to the roster, a lot of work still left to be done, but Washington has done so much in such a short amount of time here that you're going to hear them be a chic pick by some, depending on how this draft goes, to be one of those from worst to first teams. I don't see it happening. And especially playing in the division that we play in with the Cowboys and the Eagles and the Giants making some improvements too. I don't see it happening, but I see them being a much better, more competitive team. That's for certain after what they've done in free agency. So you go to number 3. And number 3 for me is another team that I mentioned earlier in the show. And it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And much like the Atlanta Falcons, there's not much here. But boys, there's some substance in here, right? I really, as you can see, them being 3rd on this list, I really love what the Steelers have done this offseason. Think about the Steelers the last couple of years and what's been the missing ingredient for them. They play quality defense. They give themselves a chance. It's been the quarterback position. Now, I don't know if they fixed that or not with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. But at least you're giving yourself a chance. That's all anyone can ask for, right? At least you're giving yourself a chance. Taking 2 bites at the apple here with Russell Wilson on a 1-year, $1.2 million contract. And then Justin Fields acquiring him for a trade where you give up minimal draft capital. If this guy doesn't see the field at all, that pick is a 6th-round pick next year. I mean, this is incredible value for a guy that was the number 10 overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft. And this is incredible value. 9 or 10 or wherever he was selected. Incredible value. So they've taken 2 massive swings at the biggest position that's really hampered them since Ben Roethlisberger, the end of Ben Roethlisberger's tenure, when he was stinking it up towards the end. And ever since, they haven't had a guy. Now they may in one of these 2. But it doesn't stop there, right? I talked about them needing help at receiver. Van Jefferson will provide a little bit of that, but they still need a lot of help. They traded away Deontay Johnson to the Carolina Panthers. Speaking of which, but the guy they got back in return, that's one of the positions they need the most. Cornerback. The Steelers were always good for some oldie but goodie at the cornerback position, going all the way back to Ike Taylor, who was 97 years old, who they just refused to let go of. And ever since then, it seemed like they were always down for an old-ass corner. Deshae Townsend was like 96 when he finally left the Steelers, right? And we can go on and on. Whether it was Joe Hayden at the end of his career, Patrick Peterson at the end of his career the last couple of years in Pittsburgh. Finally, they get some fresh blood in there. They drafted Joey Porter Jr., a legacy pick last year in the I think it was second round. Now you get Dante Jackson to pair with them. I love it. I love it for the Steelers. Then this is the kicker here. Patrick Queen coming over from your nemesis, right? This is what we call in the business a double whammy, okay? No whammy, no whammy, no whammy, stop. This is what we call a double whammy. Not only did you hurt the Baltimore Ravens by taking away one of their star linebackers, you added him to your football team. So it doesn't get much better than that if you're the Steelers. And you look at the moves made here and you go, the defense got better. The offense got better. They got to add some things in the draft. They can do that. This is a really good situation that the Steelers have put themselves in. They can compete. At what level, we'll find out, because it's all going to trace back to the quarterback. I love these moves that have been made, getting Patrick Queen, getting Dante Jackson. You can get another Deontay Johnson, but Dante Jackson's and guys like him are hard to find. He can play ball. He fits the identity of a Pittsburgh Steeler. And now you add these two quarterbacks, and I just think they've gotten exponentially better, have the Pittsburgh Steelers. So now you get to the number 2 team on my list, and I hate doing this because it seems like I do this shit every year, and I keep waiting for them to just stink. But when you keep making moves like the Philadelphia Eagles are making, it's hard for them to bottom out. They continue to fight to be relevant, to give themselves a chance to keep this Super Bowl window open. And with the offseason that they just turned in, that window is still open. Very much so. They traded for quarterback Kenny Pickett. We talked about this already. He is able to stay in Pennsylvania, grew up an Eagles fan. So, this is probably a dream come true for him. We'll see if he ultimately hits the field in any capacity. We've seen Jalen Hurts get hurt each of the last 2 seasons. He did not miss any real action this past year, however, but he wasn't fighting through an injury. We saw it happen on a Sunday night versus the Miami Dolphins. He was never the same quarterback the rest of the season. Maybe if you've got a guy like Kenny Pickett, you might feel more inclined to let him sit, heal for a week, and then bring him back out there. But 2 years ago, he got hurt, did Jalen Hurts. And in came Gardner Minshew. They lost both of those games, and Hurts had to come back probably a week sooner than he wanted to preserve the NFC East crown against the Giants. So adding Kenny Pickett as a backup quarterback is huge for the Eagles. And they've always really invested in the backup quarterback position anyway. So this is not new news. Saquon Barkley coming over is the biggest move that they made on the offensive side of the football. And this one sent ripples through the entire NFC East because most fans of the division just felt like, oh, we finally getting rid of his ass. And then he just goes next door. And they look through it's Saquon, come on in, man. Hey, we've been waiting on you. That's bullshit. But such is life, man. Saquon Barkley is now a Philadelphia Eagle. So just when you thought, okay, getting rid of DeAndre Swift, getting rid of Saquon Barkley, Cowboys, no longer have Tony Pollard. things are looking up in the division in terms of running backs that we have to face. Not so much, right? Not so much. Saquon Barkley, now a member of the Philadelphia Eagles. If he's healthy, he adds a dimension to that defense, offense. I like Devontae Parker signing a one-year deal. He's not their number one. He's not their number two. He's their third option at receiver. And for anybody wondering, he's an upgrade over Julio Jones. They didn't even get Julio Jones. They got Quintorris Lopez. So that's an upgrade over Quintorris Lopez. Is Devontae Parker on a one-year deal. I love that deal for them. Landon Dickerson, they get back, a guard that they really love, signed him to a 4-year, $87 million extension. So that's a guy that they wanted to keep, and now he's back in the fold for the foreseeable future. They hold on to 87-year-old Brandon Graham, do the Eagles on a one-year deal. They add Bryce Huff. This was probably one of their biggest signings on the defensive side of football. 3 years, $51 million contract. This is the guy that can get after the quarterback. One of the highest win rates over the last 2 seasons of any edge rusher in the NFL. Now, his usage rate wasn't very high. A guy that was really only a pass rush specialist. But I've said this already. The Eagles are probably the best team he could have gone to because they've got enough depth on that defensive line, specifically edge rusher, where he doesn't necessarily have to play on first and second down if they don't want to play him on first and second down. They can literally just usher him out there on third downs and let him do what he does best, and that's get to the quarterback. And that's a commodity that you pay for in this league. And if he can do it at the level that he's been doing it the last 2 years, the Eagles will gladly pay this man $17 million a year to do so. They add a bunch of linebackers. They've never really cared about the linebacker position. So as you can see, they're out here just throwing darts at the position again. Oren Burks is more of a special teams guy, but Zach Bond is a guy that can get after the quarterback a little bit. Julian Okwara comes over. And then Devin White is the big one. Like, this is the guy that could change the game for them defensively at the linebacker position and kind of give them what they were missing with TJ Edwards a season ago. If White comes in and plays the kind of football that he played early in his Tampa Bay Buccaneers tenure, look out. On a one-year deal, he's going to be motivated. He signed a one-year deal. He knows he's playing for a massive multi-year contract somewhere, may not be in Philadelphia. So he's probably going to ball out. That's a big signing. And then getting C.J. Gardner-Johnson back, who should have never been allowed to leave in the first place. And I think he realized he made a mistake when he left last year. They realized they made a mistake in letting him leave. And the two make up, kiss and make up. And now he's back in Philly where he probably belongs. And so, and then Jake Elliott, don't want to leave him out. What an integral part of this Eagles run that we've seen over the last couple of years where they've been really good. Well, he's been such a massive part of that, making some big kicks, crucial situations. Some of these are 60-some-odd yard kicks, 58, 59-yard kicks to win games, things of that nature. He's been fantastic, and they reward him on a 4-year, $24 million extension. So my number one team, however, and just to recap, number 7, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Number 6, the Atlanta Falcons. Number 5, the Chicago Bears. Number 4, the Washington Commanders. Number 3, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Number 2, the Philadelphia Eagles. And my number one team that has made the most upgrades and have put themselves in the Super Bowl conversation is the Houston Texans. They're going for it, folks. And, there's nothing better than realizing that your Super Bowl window is open while simultaneously figuring out that you've got a stud at quarterback after his rookie season. That's what allowed them to get as aggressive as they did in free agency, is they know they've got 3 years, essentially, 3 more years of C.J. Stroud on a rookie deal, and they've got to maximize this window while they have it because, again, I'm a prove-it guy, right? You did it once, do it again. Okay, but we have no reason to believe that he can't do it again. But I do want to see him do it again. But we have no reason to believe that he can't do it again. And going off of the premise of what we saw last year and how well he played and them winning a playoff game and hanging in with the Ravens for essentially a half of football, They're going for it now. Why the hell not? And so it started with trading for running back Joe Mixon with the Cincinnati Bengals, then giving him a new deal, right? That's an upgrade over Motor Singletary, and I thought he played really well for them, but Joe Mixon is a better back, and he's still got gas in the tank. Noah Brown played really well. He was one of the surprises of the NFL last year at the receiver position. They couldn't have known what they were getting in Noah Brown, so they re-signed him. Dalton Schultz, they slapped the franchise tag on him and then ultimately worked out a 3-year, $36 million deal. Smart on their part. Did they slap the franchise tag? I don't think they slapped the franchise tag on him. I think they just got the deal done prior to the start of the league year. 3 years, $36 million. He was excellent for them last year, right? Then they get Denico Autry on a 2-year, $20 million. I liken Denico Autry to that of former Minnesota Viking, Green Bay Packer, Cleveland Brown, and now where is he? I think he was back in Cleveland again, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check. He's back in Cleveland again. Zadarius Smith, yeah. I liken Denico Autry to a great value version of Zadarius Smith. Guys that just know how to get to the quarterback. Guys that know how to impact the game. Denico Autry is so underrated. So good. That's a really good deal for a guy that is under the radar that is just a damn good football player. They add Mario Edwards and Tim Settle and Foley Fatukasi all as defensive line depth. But here's the big one, Danielle Hunter. This is when I knew they were going for it, right? Now, reportedly, Danielle Hunter took less, could have gotten more than the 2-year, $49 million deal that can get up to $51 million. That includes 48 fully guaranteed. So the damn deal is pretty much fully guaranteed. If $48 million is fully guaranteed and the deal's 49, I mean, it's hard to turn down. I don't know if anybody else was offering essentially a 2-year fully guaranteed contract, but he's from Houston, so he wanted to go home. I've talked about the reasons that guys, choose a destination, and Danielle Hunter chose Houston because it's home, but he also sees it as an opportunity for him to win. This is a good team last year. So you upgrade the position because, yeah, you lost Jonathan Grenard, but he just turned in the best season of his career, and that was 12.5 sacks. This is a professional quarterback bagger here in Danielle Hunter. All right, this is a pro we talking about. This is a dude that he wakes up and he's getting a double-digit sack season in his sleep. He can miss 5 games and still get you 12.5 sacks. So this is a massive upgrade. Remember, they had the rookie of the year opposite of Jonathan Grenard last year, right? And Will Anderson Jr. So you add him next to, on the opposite side, and they got themselves a hell of a tag team back again. We'll see what happens. Azeez Al-Shire is added to the mix on a 3-year, $34 million deal. Really happy for Azeez Al-Shire finally getting that long-term deal he had been seeking. They do lose Blake Cashman to the Minnesota Vikings, but they get Azeez Al-Shire, and they feel really good about that, right? Then you look at some of these other little, small deals here. Lonnie Johnson back in the fold after they had moved on from him. He was a former, I think, 2nd-round pick for them. Desmond King is back. I've always liked Desmond King. And so he's back with them. And here's one that is a quiet signing, right? Jeff Okudah. I don't know if this is going to work, but if it does, are you kidding me? Now, they lost the former Steelers corner in free agency, but he was a veteran, solid player, Steven Nelson. But Okudah is young, and this coaching staff is good, and they've gotten the most out of their young talent. And I think you add a guy like Jeff Okudah to that mix, and who knows what could happen there, right? But here's probably the quietest signing that no one's talking about. Tommy Townsend, the punter. No one talks about signing punters. This is an all-pro from last season who was the punter of the Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs, was Tommy Townsend. all pro last year, and they add him to the mix. So that's a big effing deal to get an all pro punter who can flip the field position for you, pin teams inside their own 10-yard line, and force them to have to play from the shadow of their own goalposts. And with the defense that the Texans can sometimes play, that's a huge advantage. Huge advantage. So I just think that the Texans are going for it. And after seeing what they did last year and then looking at what they did in free agency and still have an opportunity to do in the draft, seeing some of the young talent that already exists on that roster, and now seeing that they're literally going for it, it's a scary team, man. Scary team. And I think they did a lot to upgrade their roster this offseason. So that is my list of the 7 biggest winners of the free agency period to this point. Let's get to the comment section and see what you guys are talking about. Remember, if you want to jump to the front of the line, super chats are the way to do that. If you want your comment read, use the hashtag LouieTLive. We'll get to as many as we can get to. Can't guarantee you that we'll be getting to a ton of them, but we'll get to as many as we can. Let's start with King of the Bluegrass. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, I think there's going to be a couple of nice tackles available after the draft from pre-June 1 cuts. There could be, but usually there's a designation, so you know what the market is going to look like. We'll see. Some of those post-June 1 cuts, I think is what you were talking about. We'll see about some of those post-June 1 cuts. Usually those designations come out relatively early, so you know who's going to hit the market. And we haven't heard a lot. But, after the draft, things can shake free, right? Guys can be let go because sometimes it's not smart to let go of a player until you have his replacement in tow via the draft. So we'll see. But I just don't expect Washington to be aggressive in that market, regardless of whatever it is. I just think they re-signed Cornelius Lucas. Love that move. Didn't think it was going to happen, but I'm so glad that they did that. It puts me at ease because now, if all else fails, you have a starting tackle. You can start Cornelius Lucas. You don't want to, but if you have to, you feel better than the guys that we've trotted out there, each of the last 2 years, essentially. So I think that you can get by with Cornelius Lucas, but he's a swing tackle. That's his role. That's his best role on a team. And you want 2 new tackles starting, if at all possible. So I still think they're going to be aggressive in the draft to try to find themselves in a position to get 2 starting tackles. But we'll see what happens. Keno, been a member for 4 months, writes, May, Daniels, JJ, doesn't matter, let AP cook. Yeah, it does matter, actually. It does matter. Don't want anything to do with JJ McCarthy. Thanks. I don't care what people are talking about. He's this, he's that. Oh, he does a great job of processing. Guy makes plays on third down. All that shit is fine and dandy. Alex Smith made plays on third down. Alex Smith was good at processing. I don't want Alex Smith, a more aggressive version of Alex Smith. I'll pass. Thank you. So, yes, it does matter. Let me get Jaden Daniels or Drake May. And look, JJ McCarthy may end up being the better pro out of those 3. I'll take my chances. Again, I'll never be mad for a GM swinging for the fences and missing versus, siding on being safe and having that guy pan out, but still leaving you wanting more and putting a ceiling on your ability to grow as a football team. You can only do so much with Ryan Tannehill, right? There was only so much the Titans could do with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. There's only so much you can do with, Alex Smith at quarterback. There's only so much you can do. I don't want a quarterback where the coach thinks it's okay to run it 32 times in a row. I don't give a damn how good we're running the football. There's not one. Now, there was one pass in there, but it was a pass interference, so it doesn't count. So I don't care how good we're running the football, what the conditions look like. My quarterback's throwing the football somewhere in there. We're going to break up the string. Like, there's not one play action fake boot off of after 9 runs in a row. There wasn't a play action boot. After 15 runs, there wasn't a play action shot to be taken. Nothing. I'm good, man. Let me sign up for the other two. One of the other two. I'm good. Thanks, but no thanks. The Black LB, my guy. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. The Black LB writes, "What it do, Lou? What's going on, Black LB?" Says, "I need the end of April to hurry up. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm trying to be about it. Nah, I mean, yeah. So you guys made it very interesting. We talked about this last week with the trade, right? You just pretty much blindly traded back into the first round again to add ammunition. Everybody, it's no secret what you're looking to accomplish and what you're trying to do. The prevailing thought is somebody's going to bite, whether it's Arizona at 4 or the Chargers at 5. Someone's going to bite. Someone's going to be too tempted by the 2 first rounders and, potentially more. You're probably going to not only just give up those, you're going to give up more in a trade all the way up from 11 and 21 to the top 5 of the draft. But it is fascinating that you would do that without knowing, right? And again, we don't know. You could have already contacted Arizona and they said, go get me another first round pick and then we'll talk. So you did, right? Same thing the Chargers could have said. Hey, go get me another first rounder and then we'll talk. And so you did. But I'm still stuck on what if Arizona's like, bro, I can't pass up the opportunity to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm sorry, can't do it. And then after the Chargers traded away Keenan Allen and the Chargers released Mike Williams, they're like, bro, we got to get one of these big 3 receivers. Sorry. I don't know if one of them will be available at 11. Now, conventional wisdom says that if you trade out of 4 or 5 and allow a team that's thinking about taking a quarterback to come up to take a quarterback, conventional wisdom says that if the first 4 picks are quarterbacks or the first 4 out of 5 are quarterbacks and you're looking to get a receiver, one could theoretically be there at 11, but there's also, you'd prefer, I'll just say it this way, you'd prefer to just get your guy instead of trading back. If you really, truly believe in one of these receivers and you, look, this is a deep receiver draft class, and if you believe in your ability to scout and you're not tied to any of the top 3 receivers, go for it. Make it happen. But if these 3 receivers are as good as everyone says, and they've separated themselves from the rest of the pack, as everybody has made them out to be, right? Separators. Are you really looking to move if you're the Chargers and the Cardinals? Which is what you have to do. You got to get in front of the Giants, or else the prevailing thought is they'll take a quarterback. I just find it interesting, fascinating that you did that. And here you are. Nobody wants to start Sam Darnold. So you're going to do something, man. There's no way you're starting Sam Darnold week 1. I do know that. I do know that. I haven't even gotten to the point where I'm fatigued yet. I think that will happen as we get closer to April. I'm so locked into free agency right now that it hasn't gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, the draft can't get here fast enough. I'm pretty sure by the time we get to the first week of April, I'm like, all right, now this is when all the mock drafts and all the bullshit ass last ditch rumors hit the fan so that they can try to confuse you and throw all kinds of, misdirections at you. And that's when I'll be like, okay, this thing can't get here fast enough. I'm not there yet, though. Not there yet. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Chris, writes, hey, Lou. What's up, Chris? Hope all is well with you and the family. Likewise, as usual, hope everything is good in your neck of the woods. Says 2 questions. 1, how much longer do you think Stephon Diggs stays in Buffalo? That's a great question. And if he goes, to which team and why? 2, what team from the AFC and NFC that missed the playoffs last year make it this year? You know, that's a conversation we have every year, and we'll have that on the podcast at some point. But just looking at some of the moves that have been made, I can give you one in both conferences right now. The Atlanta Falcons, I think, can overtake the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and win the NFC South. So I'll take Atlanta right now, right out of the gates. Feel really good about what they've done and the upgrades that they've made. And I think they're right now the team to beat in the NFC South. So I'll say Atlanta Falcons missed the playoffs last year, will make it this year. In the AFC, I think it's going to be interesting because it's so much competition out there. There's so many good teams out there. But there are a lot of teams that have improved themselves vastly. I think the easiest, most low-hanging fruit are the Jets. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy, there's no way the Jets aren't making the playoffs. I feel like that's a good roster. It's ready to win right now, and all they need is a quarterback. The defense is ready to go right out of the packaging. The offense has weapons galore. They added another one in Mike Williams. The offensive line has been fortified now. And so they got running backs for days. Breece Hall is a beast. Israel Abaconda is in that backfield as well. There's just so much stuff that they have to offer. It's the Jets for me. Now, you could easily go Jacksonville. You could easily go Pittsburgh with their acquisitions at the quarterback position. There's so many directions. Cincinnati, did they make the playoffs? No. Like Joe Burrow healthy? Are you kidding me? When he's healthy, they go to the championship game. There's just so many directions, but I'll just take the Jets. But if Joe Burrow's healthy, I could probably add a co-captain and a co-pilot there and say that the Bengals are there, right? So that's a pretty easy one right now. And it's subject to change, obviously, with the draft and what teams do. But as of right now, those are the easy answers. Just getting a quarterback, back the magnitude of an Aaron Rodgers and a Joe Burrow changes everything for those two teams. And getting a Kirk Cousins, if you're the Atlanta Falcons, changes everything for them. Quarterbacks rule everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar bill, y'all. You know what it is, right? And then Stephon Diggs in Buffalo. How much longer is this charade going to last? That's a great question. Because every year it feels like this is the year that he could be out of there. Now, Bills fans will tell you it's nothing. Stephon's just being Stephon. He'll be fine. But at what point does he just act up and say, nope, I want out this time? I don't know. I don't know. He did not end the season well. Then he had that massive drop in the divisional round against Kansas City. And so even if you want to pout and bitch and complain, you dropped arguably the biggest ball of the season, one could argue. So you can't really say anything. Can't complain about targets because then when they threw it to you, you dropped it. I don't know if he's going anywhere. It doesn't feel like it. Their general manager, Brandon Beane, was at the combine, and he spoke to Daniel Jeremiah and Rich Eisen, and he said, we hear all the rumblings and grumblings about Stephon, but everything's good. Stephon's our guy, and he's going to be in Buffalo for a long time. That's what he said. I take him at face value. I don't think he's going anywhere. But, boy, it seems like every offseason there's something else with him. And it didn't end well. And we saw how frustrated he was last year. His numbers went way down towards the end of the season. I still really can't explain it, what the hell really happened. But I like to think that him and Josh Allen will get back on the same page and get back to playing good ball. And they added Curtis Samuel. That should free up some space for him. And I expect them to add more weapons via the draft. And we'll see if Khalil Shakir continues to develop and if they continue to get, the weapons that they need. But they need a big target. I think they need a big receiver to make up for losing Gabe Davis. They got a lot of guys that are 6 feet tall. Curtis Samuel, 6 feet. 5'11", 6 feet. Stephon Diggs is 6 feet. Khalil Shakir is probably he's either 6 feet or sub 6 feet, 5'11-ish. They need a big guy, big receiver. They got some tight ends. They need a big receiver. So we'll see what they decide to do. Black Al B, my guy, Black Al Bundy. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, somebody comped JJ Mack as an athletic Jared Goff. Don't nobody want no damn Jared Goff. LOL. You said it, not me. If that's what they're comping him to, good riddance. I mean, I like Jared Goff. I don't love him. And I'm damn sure not trying to draft a Jared Goff, whether he's athletic or not, at the top of the draft. Spare me, please. Again, Jared Goff Jared Goff has led a team to the Super Bowl, and he almost led another one to the Super Bowl. So we can sit here and talk shit about Jared Goff, but he's been to the Super Bowl once. Now, when he got there, he only scored 3 damn points, but still he got there, right? And then he almost took the Lions to the Super Bowl last year. And if his receivers would have just caught the damn ball, and if his defense didn't implode, he would have gone there. Who knows what would have happened had they have gotten there? But I look, I'm not signing up for Jared Goff. That's not why as a fan, you suffer through a 4-13 season. It isn't to draft an athletic Jared Goff. That's not why you sign up for being the number 2 pick in the draft and the agony that comes with it. So I'll pass. Thank you very much. Again, I'd rather be wrong swinging for the fences than be right and be stuck with a mediocre quarterback that you'll be looking to replace 6-7 years from now, because there's a cap and a ceiling on how far you can go because of his limitations. I'd just rather just get the guy that gives me a shot. If he's good and I hit a home run, guess what? I don't have to worry about the position for the next decade. If you if you get it right with a guy with the skill set of a JJ McCarthy, you're going to be like the Kansas City Chiefs were with Alex Smith, where you're going to be shopping for a first-round quarterback 5-6 years down the road because you realize this guy's good and you can win games with him, but there's only so far he can take us. This isn't Michigan, right? You're not playing against Michigan State. You're not getting to beat up on Illinois. You're not playing against Iowa. You're not getting to play TCU. These are the big boys every single week. Can't run it 32 times in a row. Anyway, I digress. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. My guy, Chris, writes, hey, Lou, one MLB question. Which team do you have winning the World Series this year? Objectively, the Braves or the Dodgers, and why? The Dodgers are the team to beat. I mean, I know that Ohtani isn't going to pitch this year, but he's still one of the best hitters in the major leagues. So adding him to that lineup that was already deadly. We'll see if they get healthy pitching wise. I'm speaking of the Dodgers, obviously. Not having Ohtani not pitch is tough, because that's the appeal of adding a Shohei Ohtani. But I'm a Braves guy through and through. I'm a homer. I still think we're one of the best teams in baseball, and we got some pitching concerns, and we got to see what happens with our staff. And I like some of the moves that we've made, and but we're counting on a number of older guys to have good years with us once again, right? And you need your young bucks. And this is probably Max Fried's last year in Atlanta. So if you're going to win a championship, another one at least, this is the year to do it. You went through arbitration with him. This is the last year of the deal. I don't think he's going to be back in Atlanta after this. I think they're going to let him walk. I don't think they're going to want to pay him the money. Our GM AA doesn't play that shit. And so we'll see what happens. Max is going to get broken off next year, whether it's by us or someone else. And if that number gets too high, he'll let him walk. He's done it with Freddie Freeman and others, right? He's not going to overpay for Dansby Swanson. He's not going to do it. He'll just find a replacement. and he's been successful. He hasn't missed yet. So I'm looking at this, Spencer Strider, Max Fried, and we're getting some of the guys in the middle to the back end of the rotation back this year, and you're just hoping everybody stays healthy. That's been our biggest issue, is when we get to the postseason, somebody gets hurt. And Max Fried got hurt last year. Strider tried his hardest, his damnedest, but he couldn't do it by himself. And the bats went to sleep at the worst time. We had the best offense, arguably, in Major League history, and then the bats went to sleep, completely to sleep in that series against the Phillies. So at the end of the day, I still think that we're the team to beat. But the Dodgers, they just spend infinite amounts of money, and the pockets just seem to be bottomless, and they're not going to stop going for it. And right now, I'm going to say the Dodgers are the team to beat, but don't sell my Braves short. That's for certain. King of the Bluegrass, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, do you think Jahan can play slot? Of course he can. And he has at times. If you remember that rookie season, that last game of the season against Dallas where Sam got the start, Jahan played inside and outside. Remember, he caught that slot slant and had to run after the catch. He can play inside. He can do a lot of different things. Any receiver can really play up and down the receiver positions if you teach it to him. As a slot receiver, you want that guy to be quicker than fast. You would like him to be both, if at all possible, but you need quick guys inside that can get in and out of breaks, things of that nature, so you can separate. Yeah, he can play inside. He can definitely play inside. We'll see what happens. And in order for that to be facilitated, they got to go draft another, outside receiver, right? In order for that to be facilitated, they need an X or a Z. But we'll see what happens. Well, they got an X in Terry. So theoretically, you would like them to draft a Z. But we'll see what they do, right? We'll grab a couple comments, not too many. We're approaching 2 hours. And we'll get out of here. Now clean up the show with garbage time. So let's just try to get back to the top if we can. And then we'll get to a few comments. So let's go through this mix a little bit, see what happens. John Madrano says, Lou, you heard about our dinner date with McCarthy. What's the point of this? Due diligence. Why not? Like, you get an opportunity to meet with 30 candidates. Why not? You never know. Somebody could come at you with the deal of all deals, the most ridiculous deal. Remember the Ricky Williams trade, where the Saints literally gave up their entire draft, every single pick, to move up to number 2 to select Ricky Williams. What if somebody comes at you with a ridiculous offer like that? Are you going to turn it down? Like, every pick this year and our first rounder next year. So that means you're swapping with this team. Who knows? You can only be going back 7 spots, right? You could be going back 9 spots, whatever. Who's to say what? But you just got to do your due diligence. That's all I'm saying. Nothing wrong with knowing. And he could end up being the ops. He could go to the Giants. You much rather know the devil that you're dealing with than the devil that you don't. He could end up a New York Giant for all we know. Do all the homework, get all the intel that you can on this kid so that if he ends up with the ops, all right, we got a little bit of a working knowledge of what this kid is and what we can do to try to stop him. So there's a lot of different benefits to talking to players that you probably aren't going to draft. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it at all. Red Wings 01 writes, I'd say given what's gonna go down, the Bears did do right by Justin. And as much as I selfishly wanted to hold on to Sam, even when I knew he wasn't going to start, out of our front office also did right, and they did. And not only, but see the difference between what our front office did and what their front office did is they did right by Justin at the sacrifice of the organization, which is unheard of. We did right by Sam by trading him to Seattle and giving him a chance to go somewhere where he could potentially start. But we also did what was best for us from a maximizing the value of Sam's standpoint as well. We turned that in, flipped that a former 5th round pick into a 3rd round pick. That's almost unheard of in this league, by the way. So that's the difference between what our front office did and what theirs did. I feel just as good about what our front office did as theirs in terms of from a moral standpoint. But we also said, yeah, we want to do right by Sam, but to hell with Sam, we got to do what's best for us. And that's what we did. We maximized Sam's value. So I get it, though. Like a lot of people didn't understand the trade. You got to maximize the value. I told you, this is the new thinking, right? These new wave of GMs and these analytics, this is how you maximize players. You don't just look at players for their skill set anymore and what they can provide for you. You also look at them from an asset standpoint, right? What kind of an asset is this player? What can we get for this guy? If we decide he's no longer an asset to us, what can we get for him? And it's not like this is some type of new way of thinking, but the aggressive nature behind it and how you go about it is a new way of thinking. Okay. Players have always been looked at as assets once they were no longer of use to that team. But we're seeing teams pass up on these young quarterbacks more so now than ever before. It was crazy to think that a guy like Sam Howell at his age, and some of the things that we watched him do and having 2 years of very cheap labor left would be a draft, an asset that you would be trading, draft assets for. That's not what teams normally would do on Seattle side or Washington side. So a little bit different way of thinking there. But Chauncey Davis, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB OG Triple OG, who writes, what's up with the Stephon Diggs talk? Is that too expansive for us? Still need 2 tackles in the draft. I haven't heard anything with Stephon Diggs. Every year his name gets brought up. Every year we get drugged into it because he's from the DMV area. Every year, 1 year his brother faked on his account that he wanted to come to Washington. So we're always in that mix. We had our chance to draft him out of Maryland, and we dropped the ball by taking Jamison Crowder instead. But at the end of the day, anytime his name gets brought up, we're always going to be drugged into the mix. I don't see him getting traded. I don't see anything happening with him. And I don't see a team like Washington being interested in getting a guy like Stephon Diggs. We just talked about this. This draft is super deep at receiver. So any hasty decisions, like I can't believe the Titans just paid Calvin Ridley $92 million, 50 of it guaranteed. That's crazy to me. But not in the draft of this, depth. But that was their prerogative. That's what they wanted to do. When you're talking about a draft this deep at a position like that, you don't need to give up anything to get a guy. And again, trading for Stephon Diggs is a move you make if you're the San Francisco 49ers, if you're, the Houston Texans, a team that thinks, hey, our window's wide ass open, we can go for it. You do that. Like that's not where our window is. That's not where we are right now. So I couldn't see us doing anything even remotely close to that. Julio Reyes, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy Julio writes, Louie T, been a fan since 86. This has been the best offseason in a minute. 83, 87, 91, HTTR. Keep up the great work. Love from New Jersey. Really appreciate you, Julio. I've been a fan since 86 too. What a coincidence. Only difference was between us maybe, and I can't say that this is different for you, but I was born in 86. That's the difference. But 86 was a really good year. Been a fan of this team for a very long time. I can say that. I can't say how long you've been a fan of the team, but I can tell you how long I've been a fan of this team. And I've seen a lot of off seasons. And this has been one of the better ones. I can't say that this is the best off season, but I can say this is one of the better ones. You said it, I think, perfectly. This is one of the best off seasons in a minute. That's accurate. I can't think of an off season that has been better than this one in a very, very long time. And when you couple all of the moving parts, you know, having this be the real first year of our new ownership group, getting a new GM, getting a new head coach, turning over the roster and starting this rebuild the way that we are. I don't think you could have planned this any better, to be honest with you. As a fan base, we thought we knew what we wanted as a head coach. We were sadly mistaken. Glad that they knew better than we did. And I'm glad that, Ben Johnson made the decision easy for us. I'm glad that he didn't complicate matters. Who knows what would have happened? I still think, knowing what I know now, seeing how the two have been in lockstep since everything has gone down. I'm talking of Adam Peters and Dan Quinn. I find it hard to believe that Ben Johnson would have still gotten the job. But you just never know, man. You just never know. We'll see what happens with Ben Johnson in Detroit this year, and damn sure we'll be watching with as close as one can watch as to how DQ handles year one in Washington. Off to a great start. Him and Chef P off to a tremendous start indeed. Let's see. Red Wing 01 writes, I will say Kenny Pickett was given a bit of a raw deal. This whole offseason, my brain was telling me he ain't it and the Steelers should move on, but my heart wanted him to get one more chance. I just was never a Kenny Pickett fan, even going back to his days at the University of Pitt. He just seemed like a basic quarterback. And everything, all signs pointed to him being basic, from the small hands, pause, to him not really performing all that well in the lead up to the draft. And then him getting in the NFL and just not playing to the level that you would expect from a first round pick. Now, I can remember, because a lot of us have, and I'm included in this, a lot of us have recency biased. And the last thing we saw with Kenny Pickett wasn't very good. But remember how we felt about him going into the season? Remember what he did in the preseason last year and how high I was in particular on Kenny Pickett? Like, oh man, they figured it out. He's got something going with George Pickens. They got all these targets at receiver, and they added Allen Robinson, and I think that's going to be a good move for them. And oh my God, this offense is humming. They're scoring on every possession in preseason. Boy, did that turn out to be a disaster and wrong, right? So much for the preseason, by the way. But I still think you need that work. You rather look good than bad in the preseason. But what I've grown to understand is, and I know this already, but still, I'm human. Don't overreact to what you see in the preseason. Again, you much rather see your team, your quarterback, etc., perform well, than the alternative. But they were killing it. Every drive was a touchdown drive. Kenny was slinging it. Then we get to the regular season, first game out of the gate, and this 49ers stomp a mud hole in his ass, and he looks like the Kenny Pickett from his rookie season again. None of the shit from the preseason transferred over. The first team that put a game plan on his ass, he didn't know how to act. So it would have been interesting had he gotten another shot in Pittsburgh, but I don't. If what they said is true about how he conducted himself, and he wasn't the right man for the job anyway. He wasn't the right guy for the job anyway. Red Wings 01 writes, same can be said for Mac, but that was a bit more selfish, a bit more self-inflicted on his part. And Ritter, whatever. His situation doesn't really change. Also, people need to calm down about the JJ visit. I don't see, this is what happens when you get too invested in every single thing that is being done. I didn't even know that he was visiting with the team until 80 people told me. I don't care about this stuff. Like, the visits only help, for me, this is what I use the visits for, to determine what they're looking for, looking at, and what they're thinking about doing. That's it. Sometimes it's not even about the individual player itself, more about how many guards have they looked at? How many tackles have they looked at? You know, how many guys at the receiver position have they had in for visits? Like, these are the things that I look at. Not necessarily the individual player, because you could like a player a lot. How many times do these teams actually get the guy that they had in on a visit? It's rare. You're not the only team that player is going to visit with that likes that player. All it takes is for one team to like that player more than you do. Now you don't get him, right? So I don't pay as much. I use these visits more so as a barometer as to what positions they're really looking at. That's how I was able to decipher that, hey guys, they're not going tight end this year. Just so you know, they've been telling us they like this tight end group. I'm just telling you, they haven't had any tight ends in for any visits. And I told you, oh, by the way, they're not drafting a linebacker, because the one guy they had in for a visit, or the two guys, were both late to undraftable players. So I said, either they're going to take a flyer on a guy late in the draft, or they're going to go undrafted at the linebacker position. And what did they do? I told you guys they weren't going to draft the linebacker, and they didn't again. So these visits for me are more about who or how many of what position, as opposed to who particularly did they talk to. I mean, that helps too, in the sense of, well, maybe they like this player a lot, and if he's there in the mid rounds, you could see what happens. But I like the JJ McCarthy, like, guys, relax. This is what happens when you're over invested in what's going on. First of all, it's good for business. I'm glad that everybody's over invested in everything, but at the same time, you got to relax. You can't be that involved where every single thing is like a 10 or a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10. Everything can't be a 9. Everything can't be a 10. This visit that he's having with Washington is literally a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10. But fans are reacting as if it's a 9 or 8, a 9 or a 10. Relax. 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 Let's see. Niners fan. Right. I remember seeing Kyle's reaction when we drafted BA in the 2020 draft. BA is Kyle's guy. He's talking about Brandon Ayuk, guys, just so you know. You can't come on the podcast just using abbreviations like everybody knows who the hell BA is. Niners guy. All right. Niners fan, excuse me. Come on, man. You got enough characters to spell out his name at least once, or just put Ayuk, right? You're not talking to a bunch of Niners fans here, but I knew who you were talking about. He says, I have a hard time seeing us trading him, but we did trade Defoe back in 2020 as well, so I'm torn. And I saw a report that talked about that, that the money that Brandon Ayuk is going to potentially command in free agency is money that I don't know if the 49ers are in a position to spend at that. They've already spent on Debo Samuel, and you're spending a lot of money on Trent Williams, and you spent on George Kittle already, and you're spending on Christian McCaffrey. And so how much more money can you possibly spend on the offensive side of the football? BA is Kyle's guy. They traded back into the first round to get him. Like, he saw him, and Kyle's been very specific about needing what he calls a dude at the receiver position. And it took a while. He didn't just come into the league guns a-blazing. It took him a while to figure it out, but now he's a dude for Kyle. And now that you've watched him grow and develop from a young pup that was kind of chasing its own tail early in his career, he started out in Kyle's doghouse. If anybody recalls out there, this wasn't a clean transition from Arizona State to the NFL. He had a lot of expectations that weren't being met early on. And then the light bulb finally went off. And now he's balling out of his brains. And now people are trying to compare this to the Defoe situation. The reason that this is different, for me at least, is you had another guy beside him at defensive tackle in Eric Armstead that you could say, hey, if we move on from him, because we can't pay both of them, we move on from him, Eric is going to be cheaper. He's still going to be effective. He wasn't as good as Defoe, and Defoe's continued to play at a very high level, and Armstead has not been as good, and that's why he's no longer in San Francisco. But that's no here nor there. Your miss was Javon Kinlaw. The first round pick you got from Indy, you used it, you traded with Tampa Bay, you moved back, picked up more picks, and you got Javon Kinlaw, and he was a massive whiff. That was the guy that really hurt you. But that was different because you had another guy and you were able to recoup what you lost. You thought you were recouping what you lost in Defoe in Javon Kinlaw. You get rid of Brandon Ayuk, now you're chasing a dude again. And Kyle doesn't want to do that, especially when this guy has his system down to a T and he knows he can trust him. Kyle's all about trust. He trusted Pierre Garçon. That's why he was one of the first big acquisitions when he got to San Francisco. And he trusts Brandon Ayuk now. I don't see him wanting to let him go, but if the finances aren't matching up, they may have to make a tough decision. My gut tells me he's not going anywhere. That's what my gut tells me. They'll figure it out. Ghost Rider, you heard about JJ possibly getting drafted at 2 by Washington. I hope it's not true. It's lion season, bro. You're going to hear a lot of things. You're going to hear a lot of things. Alan, thank you for the public service announcement. If you're out there, hit the like button, please, and thank you. Ghost Rider says, I'm not a part of the May versus Daniel Civil War. It's a lot of people. As a not so wise man once said, there's a lot of good people on both sides. A lot of good people on both sides of that thing, but I'm not a part of it either. Chauncey Davis, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, tell our fans to breathe. There you go. All it takes is one comment from the OG to remind everybody, as you always do, especially during the season, during some tough times, when I'm trying to talk sense into people and they're just not hearing me. All it takes is the OG to speak and everybody listens. Just breathe. Just breathe. All right. Lou, first year staff and ownership, we have a ways to go, but on the right path. You preaching to the choir. You ain't got to tell me to breathe. Tell them, the ones that, are overreacting to JJ McCarthy. Now, if he ultimately ends up being the picket too, and we lose our shit, there'll be people that come back and say, see, I told you so. You were telling us, don't worry, this, that. And I'm willing to accept that too. But I feel pretty confident that this is nothing more than due diligence. Nothing more, nothing less. And I've already planted that seed. I did a video yesterday saying, hey, just back of your mind, I'm not telling you that this is going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. But just put this in the back of your mind. Don't discount J.J. McCarthy at 2. And I've already said that. And I meant that when I said it. Don't discount him. I just don't think he's going to be the pick. And I'm pretty adamant about that. I don't think he's going to be the pick. I'm not discounting him. I told you he's got 3%, a 3% chance of being the number 2 overall pick. So that's not no chance. Just very, very low. It's a very, very low chance. All right. Diggity Dank. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Diggity Dank writes, I just watched Khan's podcast with Herm Edwards on Daniels. What says you? I haven't watched it. I haven't watched Khan in a while. I need to get back on some of John's stuff because I know he's talking to some good people. And obviously, Herm Edwards has a very distinct relationship and opinion and perspective of Jaden Daniels, having coached him. Now, he coached him earlier in his career at ASU before he blew up at LSU this past year. But he's the same guy, I would assume, right? He says, maybe, just maybe, we haven't aggressively attacked tackle in free agency because you go with Daniels. You may be able to get away with a rookie tackle. I don't think the two are correlated. I don't think they think, hey, we don't have to protect Jaden Daniels as much because he's mobile, so we don't need to address tackle and free. I don't think that's the thought process at all. Because whomever, I mean, our GM literally told us, whoever you draft, whomever is back there needs to be able to play from the pocket. You still got to play the position. They don't want a guy running around like a chicken with his head cut off back there. They want a guy protected in the pocket, feeling comfortable to go through his reads and make the right decision in an accurate throw. And you can't do that if you don't invest in the tackle position. So I don't think that's what they're thinking. Again, Adam Peters has already said wide receiver is a deep draft class, so is tackle. They've spent minimal resources on both of those positions. Why? Because they know that it's deep in this draft. They've got plenty of picks in the top 3 rounds. And if they need to address those 2 positions at all in any capacity, they can. So I expect that they will. So I'm not really worried about it. John Madrano, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. John writes, sorry for the last question. You play ball in high school? I did, but I didn't get any clock for real. I was a baseball player. I was a baseball guy. And my mom didn't let me play football until I got to high school. So I was behind the curve. I had a lot of ground to make up in a short amount of time. And while I was a good athlete, I wasn't a good enough athlete for them to, and we were a good school football-wise. We had a lot of talented guys that played high-level college football, a couple of dudes that made it to the NFL. So we had talent at our school. So it wasn't like they were going to, and, you know, our coach was an ass, but I learned a lot of lessons from him. You know, one of the lessons was, ain't nobody going to give you shit. And when you're a kid, you think people are supposed to just give you stuff. So he taught me how to work hard for what I wanted, which I've applied to other aspects of my life. But I was a baseball player. I was the captain of the baseball team. I was a baseball dude. And he didn't let his football players play spring sports. You had to run track. So one of my best friends wanted to play baseball, and he told him, if you play baseball, don't bother coming back out for football. And that friend of mine was the starting outside linebacker. So, I mean, if he'll do that to him, what do you think he's going to do to me, a guy that's never really played football? So I didn't play as much as I could have played, though. If I would have went to a school with a wide open offense, like one of those beach schools, you might not know what I'm talking about. I'm talking too much. I would have had a chance to play. I was good enough to play. I'll just say that. I had a really good high school wide receiver coach. Taught me a lot. Anyway, I digress. All right, let's transition to our last segment of the show, and that's garbage time. So I don't know if you guys saw this, but this was released today that Netflix is going to be doing a new show. So remember, we talked about this a bunch of times on the podcast at the end of last year into the early portion of this year. But I think we talked more about it at the end of last year because they needed to get those quarterbacks, right, for the quarterback series. And they couldn't find any quarterbacks. So, matter of fact, we might have talked about this last offseason. And a lot of the quarterbacks said no. Jalen Hurts said no, and Justin Fields said no, and they couldn't find any quarterbacks that wanted to sign up for it. It was a really cool show. It was well done, but a lot of these young quarterbacks saw it as a distraction, so nobody wanted to do it. And I always feel like if you're going to approach quarterbacks to do that show, it needs to be established quarterbacks. You know, guys that are really good at their profession, and there's no question about their standing within their franchise. You can't ask a young quarterback that's trying to figure shit out to do a show like that. They did it the first time. It was 3 established quarterbacks: Mahomes, Cousins, and Mariota. 3 guys established. Their careers are what they are, and so there was no questions about what was going on. 3 guys at different points of their career, 3 different tiers, but all veterans. They struggled. They weren't able to find enough quarterbacks, so they pivoted and they went to another glamorous position. But now this one is going to be called receiver. So the interesting part is one of the guys that they're following isn't a receiver, though. So like a lot of people pointed that out and were hypercritical of that. I'm like, okay, guys, we get it. Okay. Show's called receiver, but one of the guys is George Kittle. Who cares? He's a character. I'm pretty sure that's why they wanted to follow him. But some of the names that I've seen attached to this show: Justin Jefferson, which last year was not a good year to follow Justin Jefferson. I don't know if this show is based off of last year and they follow these receivers last year, but it is being produced by Omaha Productions, which is the Peyton Manning group. And so it's going to be probably similar to the quarterback show, just following the receivers. But it was Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle. I may be leaving out one guy, but those were the 4 names that I very vividly recall. And if those are the 4 guys that they're following, of that group, I'd say the 49ers too are the most interesting because they won, right? Big. And then they made it to the Super Bowl. They didn't get it done, but you get to follow them on that entire journey. Jefferson had an injury-plagued season, so that's not going to be a lot of fun. And Devontae Adams went through a whole lot in Vegas, but it would be interesting to see what happens with the whole coaching situation. They did fire Josh McDaniels. They did it in the middle of the night, and I don't think we're going to get to see all of that stuff. Obviously, they're not going to showcase all the things that were said behind closed doors, but maybe we will get a little bit of an insight into, you know, why he was fired, and then they'll probably show less of McDaniels, more of Antonio Pierce. If we're talking about last year, assuming that we're talking about last year, that they followed those receivers and that we'll get that show over the offseason now versus they're going to follow them this upcoming season. So I don't know if you guys heard about that, but I did find it interesting and looking forward to it, whether it's them following those guys last year and we're getting it this offseason, or they'll follow those players this upcoming season and we'll get it next year. We'll see. But either way, looking forward to it. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the 406th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I thank you guys for joining me. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time. I'm not going to even lie to you. I'm not even going to hold you. Highly unlikely that you see me again on the podcast this week. If you do, it'll be tomorrow. But I'm probably going to move my Washington show up, my live show up to tomorrow, potentially, because it's March Madness. It's basketball galore for me starting on Thursday. And I don't want to act as if I'm all locked in when I'm going to be keeping an eye out for what's going on. And I like to have multiple screens going, the whole 9 yards. So I'll probably move my Washington show up to Wednesday night, which is tomorrow, and there'll probably be no live streams. And I was about to say, well, maybe I could sneak it in during the day. No, there's games on during the day too. There's only that little brief break for like the news to come on at around like 6. But even now, they used to have no games on from like 5:30 to like 7, and then the next game would be like 7:08. But even now, you get a couple of tips at like 4:47, and then another one at 5:01. And in those games, it'll only be like 2 games. They'll stretch over until that next wave of games at 7:08 and 7:17 and 7:26, and everybody gets going. And then, so long story short, you probably won't see me on the podcast again this week. If I do decide to do one, it'll be tomorrow. But I don't, unless something massive happens that forces me to feel like I need to come back, the likelihood is you won't see me again until next week on the podcast. But if you're a Commanders fan and fans of other teams, if something major happens and I can't get a pod to you, I'll probably put out a video though. And it might jump in if I have a chance, a window, jump in live for a quick sec and chop it up with y'all. But we'll see. I might play around with the schedule to try to get back up here and chop it up with you guys. But not very likely. It's not looking good with March Madness right on the horizon. So anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time, whenever the hell that is. I'll make it up to you. We haven't had a flashback Friday or a way back Wednesday or throwback Thursday pod in forever. So maybe I'll do one of those next week and to kind of extend an olive branch of sorts. Anyway, next week's going to be just as janky as this week. Promised to take my daughter to New York for her Sweet 16. So time to ante up on the deal, right? So going to be out of the office next week at a certain point too. So yeah. But again, we'll make it work. You guys enjoy the rest of your evening. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys the next time. Until then, you guys take care. God bless. And good night. LouieTeeNetwork.